Я представляю вам Рамону Шах, актрису, режиссера, педагога из Ирана, и Рамона расскажет нам о современном иранском театре.
Hello to everyone. Thank you. Well, as far as I noticed, you had a quite long lecture about what is experiment. So I prefer not to go there, because if even you didn't have that long lecture, I'm sure that all of you know what is experiment. I want to give you some information about experimental theater in Iran, and because the most successful period of experimental theater in Iran goes back to 50 years ago, I need to start with a little bit of history, some photos, and then I will give you some information about what we have today. So, the experimental theater in Iran started with this gentleman. He is Arbi Avanesian. He is an Armenian-Iranian director. He had his studies in London, and when he finished his studies, when he went back to Iran with some other actually friends of him who were not, a lot, like they were 6-7 people, they decided to bring to Iran what they had seen about and what they have learned about experimental theater in West, because we didn't have it by that time. So it goes back exactly to 50 years ago. They started to have a theater workshop organization, and one of the most significant points about the work was that from the very beginning they decided not to have a manager who is a theatrical person, because they didn't want to have any specific style of theater and performing arts to be dominant. They wanted to have a place with complete democracy, and they wanted to give room to everybody to come up with different ideas. So they chose one of the most intellectual characters back then. He was an architect, Iraj Safari, and he was the director of the theater workshop of the organization, and they started working. So the idea was giving room to first writers, because we didn't have that much of playwrights, or if we had, nobody would trust their texts. Everybody who were into theater by those days, like 50 years ago, they like to work based on the translations of Western plays. So it was first writers, then actors, then directors and designers. And those people were people who didn't have any home. They were like homeless artists, because nobody by that time would accept them. For example, they couldn't go to any venue related to universities, because they were out of the framework we had those days in Iran. They had new ideas, and they wanted something which was following the same roots and the same cliches and everything. So, or for example, the Ministry of Culture wouldn't approve them. All these people got the opportunity to go to theater workshop, completely from different walks of the society. Like, as I told you, the people who found this theater workshop, they were all people who were educated in Europe and the United States. And some of the artists who got the chance to go to theater workshop and work with them, they were people who had never had any chance to go out of their city. and they only know they had only some information about very, very traditional form of performance in Iran. So the first step they took, which was very interesting, and I'm sure it is interesting to you guys, was to have a call for playwrights, so they could receive Iranian plays. And this part of the story is very beautiful, always touching for me, that the first play which was chosen happened to be written by a writer who had never seen a performance and who used to go to his father's newspaper kiosk to help him selling newspapers. The only knowledge this person had about theater and performing arts was through listening to performances made for radio and through translations they would receive from time to time in their kiosk. That was all. So his play actually has a nice name. I want to tell you the name of the play. It's A Deep New Experiment on Fossils of 25th Geology Period. For that time, having such a name, and still, I mean, many of young artists are trying to follow him in, naming their plays and, I don't know, different things. So anyway, it was chosen. They produced it as the first performance in theater workshop. By that time, we actually had the opportunity to have annual Shiraz Art Festival, and little by little, artists from all over the world had started to travel to Iran. Peter Brook came to this festival. The year that Peter Brook was in Iran, this performance, which was the first production of theater workshop, was chosen to be performed in this festival. Peter Brook liked the show. He actually recommended the show to Anthony Page, who was the manager of London Royal Court by that time. So the show got the chance to travel to London as the first Iranian performance ever being performed in England, after actually the second year it had been made. And yes, so it continued like this. I mean, from the very, very first step, they started to making lots of success. I want to tell you some more significance actually about their work. They would give room to artists to make shows through laboratories. So again, this part is very important, very interesting for Russian audience, I'm sure, because one of the most successful laboratories was on Cherry Orchard by Chekhov. They actually did it in 3 different laboratories. The first was with expressing the feelings and passing the meanings through gestures without words. So they take out the dialogue and they try to perform Cherry Orchard only through movements. And the second step, the second try actually was that the actors were allowed to start from any part of the text they liked. And the third was to perform Cherry Orchard in a mansion using the house and the garden around it. The outcome of this laboratory was the first show which was performed in the most important place for us theater people in Iran, which is the City Theater of Tehran. In 1971, we had an opening for this theater, and the first performance performed in this building was Cherry Orchard, which came out from this workshop, theater workshop. Oh, I noticed that we're stuck on this photo. All right, let's take a look at some photos from those workshops and things that I told you. Let's go to this photo. This is the writer of that play that I told you, who had never seen any performance, Abbas Nalbandian. Go to the next, please. I just want to show you some photos. Yeah. Then you can go to this. Yeah. These are some parts of the show that I told you, which traveled to Royal Court of London. Maybe you can go past them very quickly. Yeah. We don't want to waste time. Well, it's not. It's not that. Okay. Okay. Oh, for example, this is one of the groups which got the opportunity to work with theater workshop. As you can see, those shishas and those stuff, they were very much into traditional forms of performing arts. And the significant point about this group is that they didn't have any place for rehearsals, so they would rehearse in the alleys of the city. And they kept the name. And when the theater workshop started its work, now they had a home to, go there and to do their rehearsals. Go, continue with showing the photos. Yeah. And they made about 6 different groups very successfully, each one, as I told you, working with different styles, different methods. But the thing was that they used to invite actors, to their shows from different groups. So it was like all the actors had to learn to act in different styles. Like if somebody was coming from a group which was into improvisation, their style of work was based on improvisation, they would get the invitation to go, for example, to a play like this, which was very traditional. They needed to adapt and they needed to learn. And through this, they happened to have lots of good actors who were able, to act in different shows. For example, there were actors who would take part into different shows in 2 nights in a row, but completely different ways of performings. They would develop their text. One of the things that they were doing was they were developing their text through rehearsals. When they had this plays, there were groups who would live there, like from morning till evening, only working because they had salary, they didn't have any problem, so they could, work as artists. Little by little, they started making making posters and brochures for the audience, and they had a questionnaire attached to the brochure. By that time, they wanted to know about people's feedback, but they didn't want to change anything for the sake of, their happiness. I mean, it wasn't like that they wanted to take any step towards commercial form of theater. They wanted to pass information, they wanted to pass new ideas, they wanted to actually make the audience familiar with coming up with new things. So they didn't care if the audience wasn't very happy, because they were not only focused on entertaining part of a show. Usually what they used to do was getting the main theme of each play and then adapt it to the latest language of theater all over the world, and adapt it to what they had, into their society by that time. They would think of those things. The society lacks from what? It was important for them, and they would implement those ideas and those things into their productions. And it was like they were like, we're here to get inspired by things that we have from past, but we don't want to copy. Because they believed, like, when you copy, nothing happens, nothing grows, nothing comes up, nothing new. Copy is a copy always stays there. But they were like, we get inspired, for example, as I told you, this is a very traditional form of performance. Let's go to the other photos. They would get inspired with the main core, with the main subject, but they would try to perform it and actually adapt it with new methods and what was the issue by that time in the society. Show it. In 4 years, actually in no time, they made a huge success. And at the beginning, they started with having repertory for 2 shows. But at the end of the 4 years, they had repertory for 13 shows. And that was the time that the whole world, if there was anybody in the world who had any idea about Iranian field of theater, it was through theater workshop. So little by little, jealousies started to come up by those artists who didn't like to give room to new people, and who they were not ready for changes. They didn't want to join these people, and they wanted to stick to the old styles of, themselves. But still, they continued, and they made lots of success. Another specific point, could you please go further? There is a nice photo. Do you have anything with the sundown? One of the things that they would pay attention to was like performances and adapting them with nature and with their surroundings. So for example, we had a story in Iran, it's called Vis and Ramin. It's like Romeo and Juliet. They had that performance performed. No, actually it's outdoor. Let's see if you can find it. So, for example, we had this performance. This is the Tehran City Theater, the most important place that I told you for the opening. We had Cherry Orchard being performed there. So, for example, they had Vis and Ramin, like Romeo and Juliet. It was performed in ruins of Persepolis, and the time of the show was sundown. Which one? No. Okay, never mind. Try to find it. Go to different photos. And gradually, while they were working, they were so successful that they were affecting different artists in different fields, like painters, musicians. And painters would come up with lots of, please go to these photos. Yeah, to this one. Yeah. So lots of painters and designers, graphic designers, like to like to join them and make posters and brochures for them. So, and they would come up with new ideas again. That was very good, because before that we didn't have brochure. When people would go to the theater makers, the directors didn't care if the audience can understand. But here, what happened was have some good respect towards the audience and give them a brochure which has, some explanations about the work. So what I was trying to say is, like, by that time they had started, bringing site-specific performances, like adapting shows which they performed in cafe house in no. Yeah, that is one of the brochures. You can show them. Yeah, you can show it. I think there are a good list of them. Yeah. So by that time they started to have site-specific performances. Gradually having performances in tea houses, in ruins of Persepolis, as I told you. For example, there was a performance which was, the whole story was happening in different rooms of a house. So they picked one of the old mansions in town and have the performance performed there, and the audience would follow the actors and actresses from room to garden. Yeah, for example, this is the one, go back to the, a little bit. For example, this show happened in a real tea house. This is a real tea house that they made it over there. So, and that was, by this time, it was like lots of artists from abroad would come to Iran, wanted to have collaboration, and lots of Iranian performances. Could you please stop here? As you can see from the photos, these are very, very traditional forms. I think they want to take a photo, go back a little bit. These are very traditional forms. Yeah, let them sign because they want to take photos. And this is the office, this is the poster which was made for this performance, which happened in a cafe house. As you can see the audience sitting on the floor, and here we have the actors performing for the audience. This is a real tea house in Isfahan. I'm sorry, in Shiraz. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Continue. If it's finished, okay. Open another one, so I will give you. Let's go to this, yeah. With sound, with sound. We don't have sound here? No. Oh. Okay, go to the next one. This is a laboratory. This is a laboratory. As you can see, the codes and everything aren't, like they don't have the final form. Go to the next one. So this is the final of that laboratory that you saw. Unfortunately, here we don't have music.
چشمی که گریانه است در عشق دلارامی بشارت آیدش روزی به وصل
We're going to be home. Toledo. 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 Toledo.
Let's see what we have next because I want to finish with the thing and go to the. This is the one that I told you was performed in London Royal Court. So, yeah. So they continued their work for 12 years. And by the time of Iran's revolution, after 1 year of revolution, theater workshop stopped its work by force of extremists. And since then, we had a huge gap of 20 years until 1997, when Mohammad Khatami was actually elected as president. And gradually he started giving some freedom to artists, little by little. Many of people who like to work as experimental artists started working, but still, because of the censorship that still we have in Iran, even these days, not only in 1997, still we are suffering from this, and that is a major problem. And that's actually, well, in a way, makes us to come up with, again, some creations, but still it's very difficult to work with, because we cannot, for example, men and women cannot touch each other on the stage, so we cannot, kiss each other, we cannot we have to be like this on the stage, and many other things. So imagine that when you want to make a show, how difficult it is to show to the audience that, for example, what I'm going through, if the emotion is related to somebody else out there and that person is a man. In a way, it's very difficult and it's actually very bad. But, okay, in the other hand, they say that that is one of the reasons that has made our performing arts and cinema and all these things to be different in the eye of the world. Because, for example, if you have seen the last film of, actually I go to an example of a film, because I think you have had more chance to watch this film. It's Camouflage in your language. The Seller, Furushande. Yeah, is it by Asghar Farhadi, the one which Oscar? Yes. I don't know if you have seen this film. Have you seen it?
Yes.
You have seen it. So you have seen that there's a film. There's a part that actually the main story is that there's a woman who has been raped by a stranger, but you don't see anything. Nobody says a word about being raped and these kind of things. And it has got a very, very, very beautiful scene. The guy goes to the house of the woman. She's married. He rapes her. She's in the bathroom. She's taking a shower. Rapes her. When he goes out, he leaves some money on the bookcase. The husband comes home, notices that the wife, is in trouble, but still the woman doesn't say anything to her husband. Next day, or maybe, few days later, they're sitting having lunch, her husband asks her, where did you get the money to buy stuff? Because as far as I remember, you didn't have money, you had asked me to give you some money and I didn't give you. Where did you get money? And she says that I went shopping with the money you had left in the bookcase. And here is the moment that the husband notices that the guy who has raped his wife has left some money, and the food in his mouth is, has been bought by the money that the rapist has left in their house. So there's a very, very wonderful moment that he doesn't know if swallow the food or not to swallow it. So you need to watch this film to feel what I'm saying. And the film won Oscar. The actor became the best actor of Cannes Festival. And it is a remarkable example, that what censorship makes us, to do. It is difficult, it is bad, but in a way, many of artists have been able to pass their meaning through these new stuff. Anyway, let's come up. So they stopped. They were stopped by force, as I told you. And after 20 years, gradually new artists started to come up. Started to make some works. There are a lot of them. Some of the very good ones, like for example, we had a young talent, Hamid Mohammad Tahiri. He couldn't survive. He made a success in his first show, but he couldn't survive because of the economical problems. Because still, we don't get any support for experimental theater. Nobody trusts, and the economical situation is very bad. That everybody wants to make money out of theater, out of any single move. But I want to talk about two very good artists that we have these days. They come up with lots of new ideas, and it's like, they are really following the same, they are following from the same place that we were stopped 20 years ago. The first is Hamid Purazari. He has worked, actually in one of his first works, he worked with Afghan refugees and child laborers. They had a long process, and after a long process of rehearsing, they got the chance to perform their performance in one of the venues related to the University of Fine Arts in Tehran. It was a huge success because it helped lots of those children and lots of those refugees, to change their life. And then he worked with some teenagers from very low-class neighborhoods in Tehran who were into crime, into drugs. Again, a long process for 1 year of rehearsals. And the good thing was, like, some of those criminals and addicted teenagers, now they have made their ways to the professional world and are like our colleagues, because it changed their lives totally. They entered the university, they took some classes, and they're working very seriously and very good. That was another thing. Then it was another production by him. Let's go to some photos. I think you haven't received some of the photos by... No, they are not. Oh. No. So anyway, I will finish it. I will finish it now. So the next one was a production in a multi-story car parking in one of the universities. Again, there was no professional artist in that show. The last project of him was working with refugees in London. It was a show in 10 episodes, which happened in 10 weeks in a row. I'm sorry, we cannot find the photos of the shows I had. All the photos, I don't know, where are they? Anyway, so he is one of the best people that I can recall. And the other person is Surusha Milanizadeh. Yes, Surusha Milanizadeh, who actually was a painter and photographer. These days, he is very, go to different photos. These days, he used different types of multimedia in his works, and the good thing is that he has his own ideas for using multimedia. The photos that you're seeing is from his, 2 years ago we made this together. It's in a gallery. We made 3 stages in the backyard, and we had it in 3 episodes. The first episode was Woman, the name was Woman. The second was, yes, this one. The second was Dream, and the third episode with red, this was Nightmare. The audience were actually prepared by, some stuff to, we would serve them different things according to each episode. For example, for this episode, because it had a very dark atmosphere, we gave them bitter olives in advance. The music was, making some atmosphere, and so that was the thing. And the last work that right now we are working on it, it's in progress. Go to that video that we have. The video that I told you, we'll show it at the end. Yeah. This is the work that we have. We are working on it right now. Partly has been made, and here is a brick kiln. Unfortunately, these brick. Do you know what is brick kiln? The place that they make brick for making buildings. Brick.
Кирпичная кладка.
I don't know, brick in English, yeah. So we have lots of these places in Iran, but they are all, closed now because of the bad economical situation. We used this place, and we had lots of girls and women. The story is not complete. We are writing it. We are working on it. Still, we are not sure. It's like a laboratory, because now during these videos that you're watching, we try to have some audience watching us, but because the location is far from Tehran and because it's very dusty and very difficult, it's very hot in summer and very cold in winter. Still, we don't know how we can manage it. It's our best choice to have the audience over there, but still we're not sure if we can make it there. But we have made some parts of videos, and we're working on it. It's going to be out for the public in autumn. So that's all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry we weren't very matched with the videos and photos. And thank you so much.
И мы быстренько